and scumbags who have been backed by the NATO war in Afghanistan. People who in the period of 1992, really in the period of 1989 to 96, the civil war that followed the Russian withdrawal, people like Saif, Rabbani, many other warlords we can get into later, were rearmed and put into positions of power when NATO came in, and essentially pushing the Afghan people from the frying pan into the fire, or the fire into the frying pan. However you will, it really has done an enormous amount. If you want to understand why the Afghan people have rejected this occupation, you look at the people that we've been backing and put in power. Is that 3 minutes already? I knew he'd have to call me on this. I think the important question we have to answer tonight in terms of prolonging this war in Afghanistan is what has the war brought to Afghanistan in 6.5 years, and I will submit that it has not brought women's rights, it has not brought democracy. On the contrary, it has brought more suffering to a people who have been suffering from foreign intervention and war for 30 years plus now. So thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody. I'd also like to thank the sponsors and all of you for coming out tonight and making this possible. And I also just want to take the opportunity to thank my friends and family, since some of them are here tonight, for being so supportive of the work that I've been doing in Afghanistan and elsewhere for the last little while, and especially to my parents for being really involved and very tolerant of my gallivanting around perhaps not one of the safest places in the world. I've been volunteering and working as a human rights activist on or in Afghanistan for the last 12 years now. I've spent some time in most parts of the country, in the north, south, east, and west, and I've really watched over the years with a lot of interest and sometimes a lot of dismay the interest of the Canadian public and media and politicians go up and down tremendously. And I must say, in this period, I'm particularly concerned about the tone of the debate. There's a lot to say about Canada's engagement in Afghanistan, but to keep it brief, for me, the bottom line is the criteria that I use to decide where I stand on the issue is looking at the consequence of any course of action that we might take. And the consequence for me of a troop withdrawal from the south of Afghanistan would be civil war or regional war or worse. There's also the possible consequence of a Taliban government coming to power. Both of these consequences mean bloodshed. They mean an end to all that has been achieved in the last few years and a misogynist regime coming into power where human rights have no place, particularly the human rights of women. These options are not acceptable to any Afghan in Afghanistan that I have ever encountered, and therefore they're not acceptable to me. I'd like to immediately address two common arguments right off the bat. The first argument being that ISAF is not a UN-mandated mission. It is a UN-mandated mission, and it always has been, and I'm very confused by the calls to replace it with a UN peacekeeping force. The UN has authorized this mission repeatedly since 2001. By any reasonable definition, the ISAF operations are a UN mission, and the Supreme Court of Canada seems to agree with that. And in fact, the UN Secretary General, Ban Ki-moon, has said that the troops' out position is, quote, almost more dismaying, end quote, than the opportunism of the Taliban, and to call for a withdrawal of combat troops from Afghanistan is, quote, a misjudgment of historic proportions. Secondly, the argument that this is in fact a US mission. Canadian forces are in command in southern Afghanistan. They're not under the command of any other country. The Kandahar PRT is under Canadian control, and the larger ISAF regional command for the south rotates between Canada, the UK, and the Netherlands. The Parliament of Canada has, of its own will, committed to a Canadian presence in Afghanistan, and our Parliament is elected last time I checked. Though I was actually rather intrigued to find your organization, StopWar's blog, make a collage with my photo next to George Bush's, posted a couple of days ago. I never thought I would see that in my lifetime, but I have. Nobody is arguing that there is only a military solution to Afghanistan's problems. So it is also a fact that nobody is merely against Canada pulling out. The question is when we should leave and how, under what circumstances, under what conditions. And those terms and conditions are spelled out in the Afghan Compact. So I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you. Great. Now 5 minutes for the main body of argument from each speaker.
And the question is, how long will we allow this war in Afghanistan to go on? How long? 2011? Will it be 10 more years after that? Will it be John McCain's 100 years in Iraq for Canada in Central Asia? And in terms of the collage, I don't do the blog at StopWar, but we have a very savvy blog volunteer who does that. But I should say that there was no collage necessary last month when you did pose with Stephen Harper for a photo op on International Women's Day, flown out to Ottawa on taxpayers' money, according to your organization. So just wanted to put that in there. What has happened in the last 6.5 years in Afghanistan? And I hope a lot of these facts can be agreed upon evidence from both sides. Life expectancy in Afghanistan is a mere 45 years. Not even 45 years. Despite billions of dollars of aid, corruption and embezzlement are rampant. So while the mansions get built in certain select neighborhoods of Kabul, there has been no investment in basic education and healthcare for the people of Afghanistan. Provincial governments have absolutely no funding from either the central government or the foreign governments. Projects never happen. CETA projects that you can see on the website, when people have gone to look for them, they're not there. This winter, over 1,000 Afghans died from exposure to the weather, to the cold. 1,000 people died this winter. There's electricity several hours a day at best, and that's in Kabul. People cannot heat their homes, and this is while we're pouring in billions of dollars. New shopping centers are going up. There's a Coca-Cola bottling plant opened up in Kabul, 5-star hotels, and yet we can't heat people's homes, and people in Kabul don't even have electricity around the clock. This is a shame, and this is a shame that we are complicit in because of our government in Ottawa, and that's what we have to work to change. Suicide rates among women remain extremely high. The judiciary of Afghanistan, right up to the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, are dominated by warlord elements and extremists who enforce rulings against women's rights. Rates of women self-immolating, setting themselves on fire as a form of suicide, are as high as ever, as high as during the Taliban years in Afghanistan. I think this is shocking for Canadians who hear that this war is about women's rights. The government and parliament of Hamid Karzai, aka the mayor of Kabul, is stacked full of warlords and war criminals. And this is according to Human Rights Watch, not according to rabble-rousing anti-war activists. Why don't we hear about these things in Canada? Why don't we hear that Human Rights Watch has said the Afghan parliament is composed of 60% warlords? Did you know that the warlord, the extremist who first invited Osama bin Laden, maybe you've heard of him, in the 1980s to Afghanistan, this warlord is currently an advisor to Hamid Karzai. His name is Sayyaf. Don't be upset with yourselves if you haven't heard about him. He doesn't get a lot of media play in Canada. The counterinsurgency war, and it is a counterinsurgency war. It was an invasion in 2001. It is an occupation. This war has taken a heavy civilian toll, killing thousands and displacing many thousands more. That's why the Taliban popularity rates are up when they do polling in southern and eastern Afghanistan. Not because the people of Afghanistan have some desire to return to the repressive years or to continue the repression that they've suffered the last 30 years, but because NATO is bombing and killing their families and their children and destroying, displacing entire villages in the name of rooting out terrorism. You can't fight terrorism by committing acts of terrorism in Afghanistan. I want to apologize for my voice. I've been struggling with a cold, so if I lose my voice at some point, I'm going to be at a bit of a handicap, but I'm just sick of the war. It's not just the results of the war that myself and the 180 organizations and many others here in Vancouver that make up StopWar object to. It's not just what the war has resulted in. We don't buy the motivation for this war. We don't believe it when feminist discourse comes out of the mouth of Stephen Harper. people get suspicious, right? How on earth are we to believe that